Today's case takes us to Massachusetts, where a mother of three vanished into thin air on New Year's Day. No witnesses, no goodbyes, no sign of a struggle. Her husband said she left for the airport, but her phone never left the house. This is the story of Anna Walshe. Welcome back to Chilling Fireside Stories, where I tell true crime stories with the utmost care and respect for the victims and bearable for my community. If you haven't already, please subscribe. It truly helps me continue bringing these important stories to you. These cases deserve to be remembered. Now, settle in and let's begin. Anna Ljubicic Walshe was born on April 13, 1983 in Belgrade, Serbia, a city rich in history, where she spent her formative years surrounded by family. Her mother, Malenka, raised Anna alongside her sister Alexandra, while her father's name has not been publicly disclosed. From childhood through college, Anna remained in Belgrade, eventually earning a bachelor's degree in French language and literature from the University of Belgrade. Even then, her ambition was unmistakable. In 2005, Anna made a bold move, leaving behind her homeland to pursue a new life in the United States. She arrived with determination and a dream, and over the next 2 decades, she would build a career that many would call the embodiment of the American dream. She became a dual citizen of Serbia and the U.S., but her heart and energy were firmly rooted in her work and life in America. Anna's journey began in hospitality, working as a housekeeping attendant at the inn at Little Washington. Within a year, she advanced to a server role, an early sign of her drive and adaptability. It was during this time that she met her first husband, Mark Nip. They married in 2007 and moved to New York City, where Anna took on a role as a program logistics coordinator. Her career continued to climb, and by 2008, she was working as a reservation manager at the Wheatley Hotel in Lenox, Massachusetts. It was in Lenox that Anna met Brian Walshe. Though she was still married at the time, she later described their connection as immediate and intense. They didn't begin dating until 2014, after Anna finalized her divorce. In the years between meeting Brian and starting their relationship, Anna remained focused on her professional growth. She earned a master's certificate in hospitality management from Cornell University and became the front office director for a Boston hotel. Anna and Brian married on December 21, 2015, at Emmanuel Episcopal Church in Boston. They settled into a beautiful home in Cohasset, Massachusetts, and over the next 5 years, welcomed 3 sons, born in 2016, 2019, and 2020. Motherhood didn't slow Anna down. She continued to pursue her career with relentless energy, balancing family life with professional ambition. From 2017 to 2022, she held director-level positions at several prestigious hotels in the Boston area. Her social media presence reflected her optimism and drive, often sharing glimpses of her work, her travels, and her hopes for the future. In February of 2022, Anna Walshe took a major step forward in her career. She accepted a position as a regional general manager at Tishman Speyer, a global real estate firm, and began splitting her time between Boston and Washington, D.C. The role was demanding, requiring frequent travel and long hours, but Anna embraced it with enthusiasm.
This is Jam Mutlu of the Mutlu Group with eXp Realty. How are you guys doing today? I have my entire team here with me. We've got all kinds of amazing folks here in the room. I'm going to show you one of them. Here she is, an L.
Oh, that was me. Hi.
That was you. Hi. Yes.
An elf on the show.
Yes. Her children were so excited to see her this morning. They said, "Mom, you look beautiful," right? Isn't that what they said?
And they were excited to see me, yes.
And they were excited. Yes, they were excited to see her. Okay, so guys, everybody, here is our wonderful team. Lydia, come on into the picture. Hello there. Here's the Mutlu Group having an amazing, amazing team retreat here at the Prudential Tower. How do I do this?
She loved her work, and despite the challenges of being away from her husband and 3 young sons during the week, she remained deeply committed to both her family and her professional goals. Anna was known for her devotion as a mother. Even while juggling a high-powered career, she stayed actively involved in her children's lives, doing everything she could to provide for them emotionally and financially. Her drive to succeed wasn't just personal, it was rooted in her desire to build a better future for her family. While Anna was thriving professionally, her husband Brian Walshe was living under very different circumstances. At the time, Brian was on house arrest, awaiting sentencing after pleading guilty to multiple federal fraud charges stemming from a scheme that had begun years earlier. His charges included wire fraud, interstate transportation for a scheme to defraud, possession of converted goods, and unlawful monetary transactions. The story behind those charges was complex and troubling. Back in the 1990s, while attending Carnegie Mellon University, Brian had befriended a fellow student named Sam. Their friendship continued even after Sam returned to South Korea, with Brian visiting him for extended stays. They bonded over a shared love of art, and Brian eventually introduced Sam to several art dealers. In 2007, Sam purchased several high-value pieces, including works by Andy Warhol. Years later, in 2012, one of those dealers contacted Sam about acquiring 2 Warhol shadow paintings. Sam agreed, and Brian, who had learned of the transaction, was present when the paintings arrived. Not long after Brian approached Sam with a business proposal. He claimed he could sell the Warhols, along with other pieces he owned, and make Sam a significant profit. Initially hesitant, Sam eventually agreed. He believed Brian had buyers lined up and trusted him to handle the sale. But when Brian came to collect the artwork, he took more than just the Warhols. He also took 2 Keith Haring prints, a Warhol $ print, and a porcelain statue from the Tang Dynasty. Weeks passed, then months. Sam heard nothing. He tried reaching Brian, calling, texting, emailing, but received no response. Frustrated and concerned, Sam contacted a mutual friend, who managed to get in touch with Brian. Brian claimed he hadn't found any buyers and planned to return the artwork. But every time they tried to arrange a meeting, Brian canceled. Eventually, Sam and 2 mutual friends, one of whom knew where Brian lived, decided to retrieve the artwork themselves. When they arrived, Brian handed over the pieces. Though Brian Walshe had returned most of the artwork to his friend Sam, 2 pieces were conspicuously missing: the Warhol shadow paintings. Whether the mutual friend who retrieved the art knew Brian had withheld them remains unclear, but what was clear was this: Brian had crossed a line. He had stolen valuable art from someone who had once considered him a close friend. And that was only the beginning. In 2016, an eBay listing appeared under the username Anseli2012. It featured 2 Warhol shadow paintings priced at $100,000 for the pair. The seller, later identified as Brian, claimed he had drastically overpaid for the pieces back in 2007, spending $240,000. He stated that while the auction value ranged between $120,000 and $180,000, he was offering them at a steep discount due to financial urgency. The listing included dimensions and, most importantly, a photo of an authentication stamp from the Warhol Foundation, meant to prove the paintings were legitimate. The buyer was Ron Rivlin, owner of Revolver Gallery in Los Angeles. He reached out and began negotiating the purchase. The person he spoke with identified themselves as Anna, though it remains uncertain whether it was truly Anna or Brian using her name. Regardless, Anna was never charged or accused of any involvement in the scheme. They agreed to conduct the transaction outside of eBay to avoid platform fees. A contract was signed, giving Ron 3 days to inspect the artwork and return it for a full refund if needed. On November 7, 2016, Ron sent his assistant to Boston with a cashier's check for $80,000. The meeting took place in a hotel lobby. Before handing over the money, the assistant asked to inspect the paintings, specifically to verify the Warhol Foundation stamp. But the stamp wasn't visible. The canvases were enclosed in oversized frames that obscured the back. Cautiously, the assistant sent Ron a photo. Ron gave the go-ahead, trusting the contract would protect him. The next day, the paintings were removed from their frames. There was no stamp. The canvases looked new. The staples were fresh. And upon closer inspection, the paintings didn't match the ones shown in the original listing. Ron immediately attempted to return the artwork, but Brian vanished. Calls went unanswered. Emails were ignored. Eventually, Ron managed to contact Brian's mother, who responded quickly but distanced herself from the situation. She said Brian would be in touch soon. He wasn't. Ron then reached out to Anna through her work number, asking for help. Finally, on November 16th, Brian responded via email. He apologized for the delay and promised to return the money once the paintings were returned. It sounded promising, but weeks passed. No refund came. Brian claimed he would send the money in installments, yet each time he made that promise, nothing arrived. Excuses piled up. In the end, only $30,000 of the $80,000 was ever returned. That's when Ron contacted the FBI. With their help, Brian was investigated and eventually charged for his role in the fraudulent sale. Though the scheme had unfolded years earlier, Brian had still not been sentenced. From 2018 to 2023, he remained on house arrest, required to wear an ankle monitor at all times. By early 2023, Brian Walshe was still living at the Cohasset home, despite having pleaded guilty to federal fraud charges years earlier. His sentencing had been delayed repeatedly, and while the exact reasons remain unclear, it's possible that the pandemic contributed to the slow progress of the case. Anna, ever supportive, had even contacted the judge to request leniency on Brian's behalf. But behind the scenes, the situation was far more complicated and far darker. Brian's ankle monitor, worn during his house arrest, operated on radio frequency rather than GPS. It could alert authorities when he left the house, but it couldn't track where he went. He was allowed to leave for approved errands, like grocery shopping, as long as he received prior authorization. It was a system built on trust, and Brian had a long history of violating it. His criminal record wasn't limited to art fraud. In 2019, Brian became embroiled in a legal battle over his late father's estate. His father, Dr. Thomas Walshe, had been a respected neurosurgeon at Brigham and Women's Hospital. Though he had built a successful life, his relationship with Brian had been deeply fractured. The two had no contact in the years leading up to his death. When Thomas passed away, Brian moved quickly, attempting to sell off his father's belongings. But two of Thomas's closest friends, Jeffrey Ornstein and Dr. Fred Pescatori, intervened. They filed a motion in court, alleging that Brian had destroyed his father's will in order to gain access to assets he was never meant to inherit. Fortunately, Fred had taken a photo of the original will before it was destroyed. In it, Thomas had written a clear and final statement. He left Brian nothing but his best wishes. The will made it clear Brian had been disinherited long ago. The family history, outlined in court documents, described a hostile and dysfunctional environment. Thomas had severed ties with Brian decades earlier and had no desire to reconnect, even refusing to meet his grandchildren out of concern for the potential consequences of being close to his son. Fred also revealed disturbing details about Brian's past. He claimed Brian had been diagnosed as a sociopath at the Austin Riggs Psychiatric Hospital and described him as violent and untrustworthy. In one incident, while traveling in China, Brian allegedly attempted to smuggle antiques and, when confronted, tried to attack multiple guards with a heavy object. Despite Brian's claims that he and his father had reconciled, the judge saw through the facade. The court ruled that Brian would receive nothing from the estate. By the end of 2022, Anna was home in Cohasset for the holidays. She had been splitting her time between Washington, D.C. and Massachusetts, but chose to stay with her family for New Year's Eve. With 3 young sons, she and Brian opted for a quiet night in. They invited a close friend, Jem Mutlu, to join them for dinner. Jem arrived around 8:30 p.m. and stayed until 1:30 a.m. He later described the evening as warm and joyful.
He said, Jem, I know you won't go out on New Year's Eve. I know you'll just stay home by yourself, and you know, Brian and I would love to see you. Just come over. Like, if there's anyone we'd love to see, we'd love to have over. It's you. Please come. And so I said, of course. Brian had cooked an elaborate meal for us, and we hugged and celebrated and toasted, and just what you do over New Year's. And there was a lot of looking forward to the new year. It was festive. She was texting with friends, and she was sitting next to me at the bar stool and at their kitchen. There was absolutely no indication that any modicum of a tragedy of disappearance or anything else could have happened that night.
On January 3rd, Anna Walshe was scheduled to fly from Boston to Washington, D.C., returning to work after the holidays. But when she failed to show up on January 4th, her colleagues grew concerned. Anna was known for her reliability. If something came up, she would always call. Her absence was deeply out of character. Alarmed, her employer contacted the Cohasset Police Department and requested a wellness check. Officers arrived at the Walshe residence and were met by Brian, who claimed he hadn't seen Anna in 3 days. A missing persons report was filed immediately. Brian then shared his version of events. He said that in the early hours of New Year's Day, Anna received word of a work emergency that required her to leave 2 days earlier than planned. According to him, she packed her bags and left the house around 6 a.m., calling a rideshare to take her to the airport. He said that was the last time he saw her. He went on to describe his own movements that day. He claimed he woke up at 7 a.m., got the children ready, and made breakfast before a babysitter arrived. He then ran errands, first to Shaw's grocery store, then to his mother's house, which was over an hour away. He said he lost his phone that morning and, without GPS, got lost en route, adding an extra 33 minutes to the trip. After a brief visit, he ran errands for his mother at Whole Foods and CVS, returned the items to her home, and then headed back to Cohasset. Upon returning, he said he found his phone under a couch cushion, assuming one of the children had hidden it. The next day, January 2nd, Brian claimed he left the house only once, to take his eldest son to a juice bar for a chocolate shake. The other 2 children remained home with the babysitter. This was the account Brian gave to police. And while officers began their search for Anna, Brian took on a concerned public persona, calling friends, asking if anyone had seen her, and expressing worry over her disappearance.
It's Brian Walshe. I hope all is going well. I was just reaching out to basically everybody I could. Anna hasn't been in touch for a few days. Do you know anyone that might have had contact with her? Calling everyone. So sorry to bother you. Sure, everything's fine.
But investigators quickly uncovered inconsistencies. Cell phone data showed Anna's device pinging near the family home on both January 1st and 2nd, despite Brian's claim that Anna had left on the morning of the 1st. This prompted a deeper search of the wooded areas surrounding the property. On January 6th and 7th, dozens of officers and canine units combed through the terrain. They even drained the backyard pool, searching for any trace of Anna. Then, something unexpected happened. On January 6th, a former residence, once owned by the Walshes, caught fire. Given the timing, it raised immediate suspicion. But the home had been sold in March 2022, and after investigation, the fire was ruled accidental, a disturbing coincidence, but not connected to Anna's disappearance. Behind the scenes, investigators were piecing together a timeline. And what they found confirmed their worst fears. Despite Brian's cooperative demeanor, he had lied repeatedly about his whereabouts in the days following Anna's disappearance. And then, the search for answers took a sharp turn. On January 8th, 2023, Brian Walshe was arrested and charged with misleading police during the investigation into his wife's disappearance. Footage of his arrest quickly circulated online, and what caught the public's attention wasn't just the charge, it was his demeanor. As officers escorted him from the house, Brian flashed a chilling smile. It was unsettling and eerie. For many, it was the moment they realized this case was far more disturbing than it first appeared. That same day, investigators executed a search warrant at the Walshe residence. What they uncovered would begin to unravel the carefully constructed story Brian had told. The following morning, Brian was arraigned in Quincy District Court. Norfolk County District Attorney Lynn Beeland led the prosecution and methodically dismantled his claims.
Before the court right now, the defendant is charged under the intimidation, that being misleading the police in the course of an investigation. The investigation was into the missing person of Anna Walshe. Police checked during the course of this investigation. There was not a Uber or any kind of Lyft that had picked her up on January 1st. In fact, in the course of the investigation, it was determined that her cell phone pinged in the area of the house, which is located on Chief Justice Cushing Way, that her phone pinged on the 1st and the 2nd, which is after the defendant had said she had left. He also subsequently indicated and stated to the police that he went to Whole Foods and CVS. Police subsequently did surveillance and checked. There was no surveillance or indication that he went to Whole Foods, nor CVS. He indicated he purchased some items. There's no receipts for him having purchased that. He then returned home.
Then she added that on January 2nd, Brian told police he stayed home all day except for a brief outing to take his eldest son for a chocolate shake. Surveillance confirmed he did visit Pressed Juicery in Norwell. But that wasn't his only stop. Later that afternoon, Brian was captured on camera at a Home Depot in Rockland, just 10 minutes away. He wore a black surgical mask and blue gloves as he pushed a large cart through the store. He purchased $450 worth of cleaning supplies, items that included mops, tape, a tarp, a Tyvek suit with boot covers, buckets, goggles, baking soda, a hacksaw, and a hatchet. For seasoned investigators and anyone familiar with true crime, the implications were immediate and grim. During the search of the Walshe home, police found blood in the basement. They also recovered a broken bloodstained knife. Prosecutors alleged that Brian's lies were deliberate, designed to delay the investigation and buy him time to clean up the scene. His attorney argued that Brian's only mistake was failing to disclose certain details to police. But the evidence was mounting, and the truth was beginning to surface. Brian Walshe's trip to Home Depot on January 2nd wasn't just suspicious, it was a direct violation of his probation terms in the federal fraud case. His attorney argued that he had remained cooperative and under police supervision, and therefore should not be held. But the judge disagreed. Brian pleaded not guilty, and bail was set at $500,000. In the days following his arrest, the town of Cohasset came together, not in outrage, but in quiet solidarity. On January 12th, members of the community gathered at the First Parish Unitarian Universalist Church to honor Anna Walshe. As investigators continued their search, the community's concern shifted toward Anna's 3 young sons. All under the age of 6, they had been placed in state custody following Brian's arrest. Friends and neighbors were heartbroken, not just by Anna's disappearance, but by the uncertainty surrounding the children's future. Many hoped the boys could remain together, ideally with a loving family willing to adopt them as a unit. Several close friends even offered to take them in, stunned that the state had intervened before those arrangements could be made. While the emotional toll deepened, investigators pressed forward. They returned to the Walshe home, searching the property and surrounding woods for any sign of Anna. K-9 units combed through brush and roadside areas. The effort was relentless. Then, on the same day Brian was arraigned, investigators made a chilling discovery. At a trash transfer facility in Peabody, Massachusetts, search teams and police dogs uncovered several trash bags containing blood, a hatchet, rugs, and used cleaning supplies. The items were immediately flagged as potential evidence and sent to the lab for testing. Officers in hazmat suits spent hours sifting through mountains of refuse, determined to find answers. The timing was no coincidence. The search unfolded just hours after Brian stood in court, charged with misleading investigators. And while the public was still reeling from the revelations, law enforcement knew there was more evidence they hadn't yet shared. The investigation into Anna Walshe's disappearance took a grim and irreversible turn on January 17, 2023. That day, Brian Walshe was formally arrested and charged with her murder. Prosecutors alleged that he had not only killed his wife, but dismembered her and discarded her remains in a calculated attempt to erase all traces of the crime. Brian pleaded not guilty. During his arraignment the following day, the public was confronted with a disturbing timeline of events and a chilling list of evidence. Investigators had uncovered a series of incriminating Google searches made on Brian's son's iPad, searches that included phrases like 10 ways to dispose of a dead body, how long before a body starts to smell, and can you be charged with murder without a body? These searches began in the early hours of January 1st, the same day Anna was last seen. Brian's earlier claims that he had run errands for his mother on January 1st and taken his son out for a shake on January 2nd had already been disproven. Surveillance footage and cell data revealed a different story. On January 3rd, Brian traveled to Brockton and Abington, towns he never mentioned to police. There, cameras captured him at multiple apartment complexes, tossing heavy trash bags into dumpsters, bags he struggled to lift, flinging them over his shoulder to reach the top. It's believed those bags contained Anna's remains. Tragically, by the time police realized Anna was missing, those dumpsters had already been emptied and their contents incinerated. If Anna's body was among them, it may never be recovered. On January 4th, the same day police performed a wellness check at the Walshe home, Brian was seen shopping at HomeGoods, TJ Maxx, and Lowe's. He purchased towels, bath mats, men's clothing, squeegees, and a trash can. Officers inspecting his car noticed the back seats were folded down and covered with a plastic liner. When they returned the next day, the liner was gone. Brian claimed he had thrown it out. Then, on January 5th, cell data placed Brian near the dumpsters behind his mother's apartment in Swampscott. He stayed only briefly, suggesting he wasn't there to visit. He was likely disposing of more evidence. On January 8th, investigators searched the Walshe home and found blood in the basement, along with a broken blood-stained knife. A second knife was later recovered nearby. But the most damning discovery came on January 9th at a trash transfer facility in Peabody.
After investigators spent hours in hazmat suits, combing through mountains of trash with the help of police canines in Peabody Monday, the I-Teams now learn more about what was found at this transfer station off Route 1. I-Team sources say there was evidence connected to missing Cohasset mom, Anna Walshe. Sources tell our I-Team investigators found trash bags with blood, a hatchet, a rug, and used cleaning supplies. Their search of the trash facility unfolding hours after Anna's husband, Brian Walshe, was in Quincy District Court, charged with misleading the investigation into her disappearance.
But perhaps the most chilling revelation came from Brian's digital footprint. Using his son's iPad, Brian had conducted a series of deeply disturbing Google searches between December 27th and January 3rd. The earliest search, "What's the best state for a divorce for a man?" was unsettling, but not incriminating. What followed, however, painted a far darker picture. On January 1st alone, he searched the following. On January 2nd and January 3rd, the searches continued. These searches weren't vague or theoretical. They were methodical, specific, and deeply incriminating. Prosecutors believe they reflect Brian's intent and preparation. And while he remains legally innocent until proven guilty, the sheer volume and nature of these queries have become a cornerstone of the case against him. As for motive, investigators began examining Anna's financial portfolio. She owned multiple properties across Massachusetts, Maryland, and Washington, D.C., none of which listed Brian as a co-owner. Her real estate holdings were valued at approximately $2.8 million, and in the 5 years leading up to her death, she had sold at least 4 homes, earning over $3 million. Just days before she vanished, Anna closed on the sale of a Massachusetts apartment, turning a $137,000 purchase into a $220,000 sale. If Brian stood to inherit Anna's estate, the financial incentive was undeniable. And tragically, in cases like this, money has often proven to be a deadly motive. By all accounts, Anna's new role in Washington, D.C. was a major step forward. Friends described it as a dream job, well-paid, full of benefits, and a reflection of the success she had worked so hard to achieve. Even Brian acknowledged her accomplishments in court filings, noting her income and career growth while pleading for leniency in his own sentencing. He admitted he couldn't relocate to D.C. due to his legal situation and that Anna's career had outpaced his own. That imbalance may have weighed heavily on him. Brian, once presenting himself as a successful entrepreneur, was now confined to house arrest, his reputation unraveling, his finances strained. The contrast between Anna's rising trajectory and his own decline may have fueled resentment, jealousy, and emotional instability. Experts have suggested that financial stress, coupled with untreated mental health issues, can intensify feelings of inadequacy, rage, and desperation, and Brian had a documented history of violence and manipulation. He had been diagnosed as a sociopath, he was facing prison time, and he may have feared losing everything: his freedom, his family, and the image he had tried to maintain. Some believe this was a case of possessive control. If he couldn't have Anna, no one could. On February 9, 2023, Brian Walshe appeared via Zoom for a status hearing. Prosecutors reiterated their belief that he had staged the disappearance of his wife Anna, fabricating an emergency work trip and suggesting she'd left on her own accord. The defense agreed to a continuance, citing delays in receiving critical discovery materials such as search warrants and property inventories, documents they argued should have been handed over much earlier. The judge scheduled the next status hearing for March 1st, and Brian was ordered to remain in custody at the Dedham House of Corrections without bail. By mid-2024, the case had continued to evolve, though Anna's body was still missing. Prosecutors remained steadfast in their allegations that Brian beat Anna to death, dismembered her, and disposed of her body in trash bags, which were later incinerated before police could recover them. Brian Walshe continued to plead not guilty. He remained held without bail at Norfolk County Correctional Center. At a hearing scheduled for June 24, 2024, which he did not attend, prosecutors confirmed that DNA analysis was still underway, including advanced testing on tissue samples recovered from a saw found near his mother's residence. That equipment had been sent to Bode Technology, a specialized external lab. Outside the murder case, Brian was sentenced to 37 months in federal prison for his role in a long-running art fraud scheme involving counterfeit Andy Warhol pieces. His legal team filed an appeal shortly after sentencing, while court-appointed defense counsel in the murder case continued to process the vast evidentiary file. Digital searches suggested that Brian may have suspected Anna of infidelity. That quiet prelude now reads as a chilling hint of a violence that would follow. As the forensic work continues, attention has now turned to the courtroom itself. Brian Walshe is set to stand trial in October 2025, nearly 3 years after Anna's disappearance.
Today, the judge set several hearing dates and a trial date now of October 20th, 2025. The prosecutor told the judge that he expects once that trial begins, it will last approximately 4 weeks.
Brian Walshe continues to assert his innocence. But if convicted, he could face life in prison without parole. Meanwhile, Anna's 3 sons remain under the care of the Massachusetts Department of Children and Families. The emotional toll on Anna's family is immeasurable. Her absence echoes through every milestone her children will face: birthdays, graduations, moments once meant to be shared and cherished. She deserved to be here for all of it. No matter how many times cases like these are told, it never becomes easier to grasp how someone could do this to the person they claim to love. A partner, a mother, a woman who built a life of resilience and brilliance. And though Anna's body has not been found, the voices demanding justice for her grow louder each day. Her children deserve peace, healing, and a future untouched by the darkness left behind. Thank you so much for watching today's documentary. I know this case weighs heavily. It's heartbreaking, disturbing, and leaves behind more questions than answers. But Anna's story matters. Her life matters, and I promise to keep bringing you every update as the trial approaches in October 2025. When the verdict is reached, I'll post it in the comments below, so those following along can stay informed and connected. Until then, stay safe and look after your loved ones.